wife calls and she's like, babe, I can't sleep because you did this to me, and your son is like ready to split me open. And it's freaking Tuesday afternoon and the plumber won't show up. The mods are dropped. They can't continue and start laying the floor because they got to break through the subfloor and get the plumber to make the connections. Can you help me track the plumber down? And I was a little tired, a little stressed, picking up on her stress, but that was the breaking point more for me, where I was like, damn it.
Yeah.
We are a civilized society. How can we not figure out how to solve this? This problem is now personal to me.
Welcome back to Strong Conversations, recording here in Las Vegas as part of the International Builder Show. I am Sam Marcoux, and he is quite possibly the most interesting man in the building industry, and you guys are going to agree with me at the end of this, Mr. Garrett Moore. Garrett, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Sam.
Well, I'm going to tell everybody up front, this is the first two-part episode, maybe the only two-part episode that we'll ever do here at Strong Conversations, and that is because I think leading up to this, you and I sat down and had, 3 different prep calls for this episode today?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have so much that you have done in your life, so much going on right now and in your past, and you're so interesting that myself, Nate Johnson, our mutual friend, we're like, this has to be a 2-part episode at a minimum. He wanted to go to 3, by the way, but I think we're going to stop at 2 parts. So for everyone listening, this is part 1. This is the backstory. This is the origin of Garrett Moore, and then we're going to get into some of the business stuff and what you're doing currently at the end. But speaking of currently, tell everybody who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and then we'll jump into the overall story.
Garrett Moore, CEO of TektonOS, married to my childhood sweetheart, father of 3. That ultimately sets kind of the tone for everything else. And so, yeah, that's who I do it for.
Right on. So let's start from the beginning. You were born up in Northern California, right?
Yep.
So where were you born?
I was actually born at Stanford Hospital.
Stanford Hospital.
Yep.
All right. Everybody keep track of that because that's going to come into play a whole lot later. You didn't stay in Northern California too long, right?
No. I lived there till I was 5, so just a little bit after the 1989 earthquake. I laugh about this to this day. Mom and Dad left the Bay Area because the late 80s was too high-paced and too frenetic. Little did they know where it would go over the next 20, 30 years.
Right.
So we moved out to Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay.
And so that's where I grew up.
Yeah. Now you have siblings, correct?
I do. I'm the oldest of 3. There's 3 of us in 3.5 years, so we're all pretty compressed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So growing up, you have a brother and a sister?
Yep. So middle is a sister, youngest is a brother.
And were you guys like best friends and on top of being, siblings?
Yeah, we're pretty. I mean, frenemies because
Right,
you're siblings, but no, very, very close. Grew up drowning each other in the pool and having a great time. Parents were always really involved, so we did a lot of travel as a kid.
Okay.
My dad was a school teacher and owned a restaurant, sports bar. My mom was a flight attendant, so we didn't have a ton of money, but as a flight attendant, we could travel like we were kings.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the thing that we did as a family, is we got to travel all over the world.
Do you remember like your first trip or like the most memorable trip as a family as a child?
So the most memorable trip was actually before my mom became a flight attendant. So my folks are crazy in a really good way. They got a bee in their bonnet to go ahead and move overseas. So I was homeschooled early elementary. Come my 5th grade year, they're like, screw it, let's live a wild and crazy. So we moved over to Italy, and so I lived in Italy for a year, drop of a hat, on a whim. So that was a really impactful trip when you're an 11-year-old boy and you're living overseas and experiencing the world. So that was probably the first major trip that opened my eyes to the world.
I was going to say, your eyes have to be wide open at 11 years old. You're living in Italy and just with the family unit, right? Like you said, you guys are all close in age.
And you're a sponge at that age.
Yeah.
You pick up language and food and culture, and it was really really eye-opening as we kind of get to the later part of my story and thinking about my appreciation for a more global perspective and kind of having broader aperture. That was really foundational for me.
Yeah, it's got to be. So for all intents and purposes, Scottsdale's home though, right?
Yep.
In terms of being your childhood.
Yep.
You were heavy into sports growing up?
Sports in school.
So what was the what was the sport or sports that you were playing?
I kind of like to play everything.
Yeah.
Really, basketball was my favorite sport.
Really?
Not very good at it. But it got to the point where you get to high school, and then I had a basketball coach that made me choose my sophomore year. Hey, I'll put you on varsity basketball or varsity football. And I hated that because I wanted to do both. They were different seasons. So that never really landed very well with me. But at that point, I'm 15, 16, had to make a decision and go, is there a future in either of these sports? I kind of looked at it and said, probably not in basketball, therefore I'll choose football. So double down on football from there.
Yeah, I had the same dilemma in middle school, but it was after one game of basketball, and I realized I wasn't very good, so I was going to go find another sport to play. I didn't have the same issue you had. It was more the coach like, look, you can't be here. Like, go find a different sport. So same but different, I would say.
Yeah.
So what position did you play in football?
So not very athletic growing up, still not very athletic to this day, not very fast, can't really jump. So they put me at quarterback because it's like, that's the position that you can kind of get by, I guess, with the least athleticism. So I stumbled into that and actually found a really strong liking for it. I like the chess of it. I like the leadership. I like the ability to orchestrate and kind of be a conductor or a general on the field.
Yeah.
And it didn't highlight my weaknesses, which are kind of more the physical attributes.
Well, look, Dan Marino is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and I think he rushed for a total of like 13 yards in his entire – that's why he had the 13 as his number. It was a representative of his yards running after 17 years. So you're right. Maybe it kind of masks some of the athletic defects, if you will.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so you're playing quarterback. You've made this choice as 15, 16 years old to go with varsity football instead of varsity basketball. You finish up your high school career in terms of both academics and athletics.
Yep.
And what happens next? Where do you go?
I played my last game my senior year. Didn't expect college football to be on the horizon. I'd done kind of visits and kind of seen some different schools, but academics was a priority, and I kind of was self-aware enough to know, like, look, this is a great chapter, but it's probably got to come to a close. I've got to spend some time on academics, and that'll ultimately carry the mail forward. After the season, and ended up getting a call from Stanford, and they said, hey, we'd like you to come play for us. And at the time it was a guy named Buddy Tevens, and that was perfect because I was going to try and go there even if I wasn't playing sports anyway. And so was fortunate enough to get in, and at that point it was a slam dunk and no-brainer. And I had kind of grown up, young man wants to make his way in the world. My parents had gone to school at Stanford, and I was like, no, this is not for me. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go to the East Coast, or I'm going to do something else. And then just time goes on, and fell in love with the farm. It was a great place, obviously great academics, great athletics, football notwithstanding, and it was just the right fit. It was home for me.
So born in Stanford.
Yes.
World traveled, 11 years old, living in Italy, Scottsdale with your younger sister and brother, playing football, back to Stanford, back to where it all began, to play quarterback for the Stanford Cardinals.
Yep.
Now, when you were there, you had a lot of head coaches, right?
I did. I went through 3 and 3.5 years.
Who were those coaches?
So my first one was Buddy Tevens, who ended up going on to coach at Dartmouth. He's actually passed away since then from an accident. Walt Harris was my second coach. He was coming from University of Pittsburgh. It was a rough chapter. And then ultimately the third coach is the one that's made notoriety because it was Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh, who currently, as we record this, is the head coach for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Formerly San Diego Chargers.
Really tough for me to not say San Diego.
Not bitter at all whatsoever.
Not at all. We'll get to San Diego later in your story here. So I think let's focus a little bit on Jim Harbaugh, because he is the head coach of the Stanford Cardinals, and he had a lot of success. He's had success everywhere he's gone, including down in San Diego as a college coach as well. What was it like playing football under the tutelage of Jim Harbaugh as the head coach?
So he is one of the most energetic, passionate, driven coaches I've ever come across. And I think the best way I could describe him is intense.
Yeah.
In the good and the bad, everything he does is 1,000 miles an hour. And I think that's what allows him to be such an agent of transformation in programs. Because if you want to turn a program around in a year or two, you've got to bring, he used to have a phrase, I think he used to say an intensity, or do something with an intensity unknown to mankind, just like 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah. And
that's a shot across the bow and a shock to a system where the year before we went 1-11. You're kind of down in the dumps. You got beat by a 1AA team in UC Davis at the time, and that was a really big breath of fresh air. He also valued the student-athlete paradigm, coming from Michigan himself, and so it was he was a whirlwind, and a force to be reckoned with, and that was really excellent for the program, and it was needed.
So that's like an overall, like you said, that transformation of turning that Stanford program around and doing it quickly, right?
Yeah.
He didn't really have time to waste, so he had to expedite everything. Can you give me an example of his coaching? And do you have a story that you could share with everybody when it comes to Jim Harbaugh being the head coach?
I do, and it's actually a story after I had left. So I ended up, I saw the handwriting on the wall pretty quickly. We'll come back to that later.
Yeah.
But I ended up graduating a little bit early, left school and pursued another career. But when I came back to, I think I was speaking at one of the chaplain services before the game, and he had invited me back, and so I was on the sidelines or whatever. And here we are, like, I think it was actually in Pasadena. It was at the Rose Bowl. It was a game against UCLA. And here he is. He now knows I'm a SEAL at the point and coming back, and he wants to challenge me to a push-up contest on the field before the game. Like, he's so competitive.
You have Jim Harbaugh challenging you, which, spoiler alert, we'll get to. You were a Navy SEAL.
It was just like he couldn't compete. He's like, okay, somebody that's doing something that's atypical or whatever, but I've got to, not out of ego, but just out of a consummate competitor.
Yeah.
And it was just like, let's do it. I want to compete. It's like, oh, you're a marathon runner? Like, you can't go out and run a marathon. But the point is, like, everything he does is so incredibly competitive, and that's infectious to a team.
Yeah. I mean, you, where the head goes, the body will follow, right?
Yep.
I mean, and you see that with Jim Harbaugh in particular everywhere he's gone,
Yep.
including now with the Chargers. Turn them around in one season, and now they're a playoff, Super Bowl contender.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So, I mean, there's leadership there that you can, just take and apply later in your life. But we're going to jump back to your playing days because Jim Harbaugh's the coach.
Yep.
Your last year there, if I'm not mistaken. You're a quarterback.
Yep.
But you weren't playing a lot, right?
Nope.
Why was that?
So the simple answer is just surrounded by way more talented folks. And you come in out of high school, and usually a high school player is, you're a big fish in a small pond, wherever you grow up. And then you step up a notch, and some people are still big fishes in that pond, but most of the time it's a shot across the bow of like, holy smokes, these folks are bigger, stronger, better, all across the board. All of which are great friends to this day and stay in contact with them. But the nature of college sports is, so I was sitting behind a guy named Trent Edwards for the first few years. He went on to play in the NFL.
Yeah.
And then there's a leapfrog effect.
Right.
So at the time we were recruiting a young man named Andrew that, by all accounts, seemed to be very talented. He's a junior or senior out of Texas. And you start to run the math and look at it and go, I probably am going to get leapfrog. This is not in the cards. And you also do some self-reflection and go, is this going to be a future? Can I go play in the NFL? And the reality is, no, you can do the math if you've got enough self-awareness. And so at that point, that also happened to be when I started to think about, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And obviously, there was a little oppression at the time because that guy ended up becoming Andrew Luck, who's now back at the farm as a general manager, and he's going to do awesome things for the program, and I'm super, super excited. But it's the reality of college sports. Like, there's a lot of talent.
So that self-reflection that you talked about, was that some people have zero ability to do that. They're not introspective. They don't know what their limitations are. They don't know what their, maximum effort would be. You seem to have that. At least, was that developed in college, or was that something you've always had? Like, I know I can do this, I can't do that. I have to plan according, or where did that come about? Do you know?
I don't know. The cheeky answer would be like, hey, when you've always been mediocre, you don't know anything different. Like, that's probably not correct. I think specifically at that time, I'm growing and coming of age as a young man. I had a really influential experience. A good friend of mine from high school played football, basketball, everything with him. He ended up committing suicide. Oh. And that was the first, like, holy smokes, slap in the face kind of close death experience. And one of the things that he really valued was military service. But growing up in Arizona, like, parents didn't serve.
Yeah.
Nobody around me served. So that probably started a little bit of the self-reflection journey. It was continued because I did an internship and did some management consulting for a little bit. Hated it. And so you're kind of looking at this going, man, I love this teamwork, this camaraderie, this bond of a common purpose. I'm not really feeling it in the business world, but I'm capped. I can't keep going on and playing sports. The talent's not there, et cetera. What do I do?
Right.
What's my place in the world? Where can I make a dent in the universe? And that caused you to kind of do some thinking.
Yeah. So, like you said, that teamwork that you got, that, how many student athletes are there on a typical college football roster? It's like 90 or something like that? Is it more than that?
We carried about 100 to 105 any given year, dependent.
So let's just say 100 for easy math. I'm a sales guy, zeros and fives, right?
Perfect.
But 100 athletes, like you said, all of them were big fish in a small pond at one point of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
They come together. They have to work as a team,
Yeah.
and they have to be efficient. And you have a coaching staff that they are designed to get the most out of them, right? The maximum amount of effort out of all of these students, all of these kids, whatever you want to say, and get them pulling all in the same direction.
Yep.
It's incredibly difficult.
Yep.
Whether it's football or any other business venture, to have that many people doing the same thing at the same time the right way. You had talked before, you loved that functionality. You loved that teamwork. Like you said, you're capped. You're not feeling it in business quite yet. You're capped when it comes to the athletic side of things. You don't have a lot of military background, at least in your immediate family, but you decide to take that leap and join the military.
Yeah, so the silly logic in the brain of a 20-year-old, which, by the way, that brain isn't fully formed for a few more years, but you're making big decisions. So 20-year-old Garrett was like, the military's kind of like sports for adults. Let's try this thing out. Like, I kind of grew up with good down-home values. So like the idea of service to a greater cause, pushing yourself, bleeding red, white, and blue, like that was easy. It was just kind of, okay, where do you point that underlying current? And so my buddy's passing kind of caused that self-reflection, and it was like, you know what? I could get on board with that. But in for a penny, in for a pound, like, why not try something harder and look into special operations? So I remember, exactly, I went to a local library pre-season, or no, it was during the season, grabbed a book on the Navy SEALs. And I remember reading it. We were playing up at Oregon up at Autzen, by the way, which is an insane stadium.
Yeah.
When people talk about Autzen being one of the loudest in the country, Simpson Engineering, they funnel all the sound directly onto the field. It is every bit as loud as it's cracked up to be. Really cool acoustic engineering in a stadium, by the way. So I was up there, read this book about the Navy SEALs called Warrior Elite, and was like, holy smokes, this guy stay up for days. It sounds utterly miserable. Who in their right mind would ever do this to himself? But it planted a seed.
Yeah.
And that seed just kind of nagged and nagged and nagged, and it wouldn't go away. And by the end of the season, I remember being like, man, that's really cool. It was no longer like a hell no way. It was, well, what if? What if? And so that's where I really started to kind of go through the motions. And again, superficial brain of a 20-year-old. I was like, oh, they're in San Diego? Yeah, I can get on board with that.
I can live there.
Yeah.
So the what if phrase is probably the most powerful and dangerous two-word phrase in the history of language, right? Because so much has come out of what if.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you're talking about in any line of work or anything else. But you said the book was, now, did you know you were going to go into the military at that point? You just didn't know maybe which branch, or you wanted to do special ops, but you didn't know?
No, it was just like a wide open canvas. Hey, this concept seems to check the boxes. You get to make your dent in the universe. You get to do physical stuff with a team that works together for a common mission and has value for making society better. Like, we're kind of checking most of the boxes here. And so as I started to kind of think about special operations, spent some time looking at Green Beret Ranger, Pararescue, MARSOC wasn't even really stood up at the time, and kept coming back to this. And so I ended up getting put in touch with recruiters, and recruiters kind of redirect you, and I met a couple of SEALs, and I was like, holy smokes, that's a kind of fraternity or brotherhood I want to be a part of. So I fell in love with the people and the camaraderie and teamwork that I saw, and at that point I was sold. So that's now I'm in my redshirt sophomore season, end of redshirt sophomore season. Walt Harris has been fired. Jim Harbaugh's coming in that spring. That spring I said, okay, well, during spring ball I'll start to cross train. And so I started training for triathlon down in San Diego.
Okay.
It's like, okay, let's stretch the body, test endurance. I grew up in the water, so swimming wasn't an issue. Started to train, and realized actually my body actually was wired for endurance. All the 40 times in the vertical and all the things that I wanted in football that I couldn't get, my body was actually much more of a distance capability. And so spring ball comes around, I'm cross training, get put in touch with a recruiter, put a package in. He says, hey, look, dude, your dad's not an admiral. Nobody gets selected to become a SEAL unless you go to the Naval Academy. Like, don't even bother. I was like, well, humor me. I got nothing to lose. I got 2 more seasons I can keep playing. I can keep doing this. He's like, okay, fine. You're gonna apply for 3 or 4 more years if that's what it takes. I was like, okay, fine. No drama. Put in an application and then got picked up right after spring ball. It's kind of like May or June timeframe.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, they'd said, hey, you can ship out pretty quick. I had the credits to graduate a little bit early. So I remember walking into Coach Harbaugh's office right before the summertime and said, hey, Coach, I got a passion to do something else. This is not a reflection of you or the team. I love this team and I would die for this team, but there's this other thing that it's an itch I can't scratch. And to his credit, he was like, absolutely.
Go do it.
Do not let us stand in your way. Like, we will be cheering you on. Go crush. So put in the early graduation paperwork and ended up shipping out about 6 months later.
What year is this now?
This is 07. So
2007.
In that time frame, Coach Harbaugh has his first season. My buddy Tavita Pritchard has the major upset at USC that year. So that was what really put Stanford on the map. I was like 45-point underdogs with, I think, Matt Leinart, was the QB that year. That might have been Reggie Bush's last year as well.
Okay.
Huge upset. Stanford's now on the map.
Yeah.
Coach Harbaugh's turning it around. Right after the season, I ship out.
Okay. All right, so 2007, that season ends, like you said. They're on the upswing.
Yep.
Harbaugh's magic is starting to, show up. But you said, okay, not only am I joining the Navy, I'm going to be a SEAL.
Yeah.
Take me through that onboarding to be a SEAL with everything that goes into it. That's got to be absolutely monumental.
So it starts with my parents don't know anything about this at this time. So this is...
You hadn't told your parents?
Oh, no. So, well, I hadn't told them. So I snuck down to Southern California for a triathlon. They're like, oh, that's kind of strange. They knew I was doing the triathlon. While I was down there, I pulled them aside and said, hey, Mom, Dad, I got something to share with you. Like, this is going to come out of left field. I want you to support me no matter what. And their brain is spinning through all kinds of stuff.
Right.
You murdered somebody. You're fleeing the country. Like, their brain is going 1,000 different directions. And finally, I'm like, hey, I want to become a Navy SEAL. They're like, oh, thank God you didn't kill anybody. You're not going to jail. Awesome. This is great. Oh, you might die in combat? Okay, no drama. And so that started a journey of, where is this coming from? Why would you do this? Why not go into business? Do whatever you want to do. Like,
yeah.
you gotta, and so that starts kind of a growth process with family and friends. But the more time goes on, the more they get on board. Okay, so now I'm everybody's tracking. I'm on board. Okay, so I go out to officer candidate school, which is where you earn your commission out in Rhode Island. Miserable, way worse than Bud's. I hated it. Rhode Island in January, February, March. Cold,
yeah.
Just getting yelled at for no reason. It was a huge sucker punch. I was immature and unprepared for the good order and discipline of the military. That was really hard. But you come back from that, and then essentially the way that program works is you're guaranteed a shot to go to Bud's as an officer. So you show up day one in San Diego. It's probably April of 2008 at this time.
Okay.
And it's game on. Like, ultimately, you pseudo control your destiny. Don't quit, and you can stick around.
So we're talking to Garrett Moore here on Strong Conversations. He's taking us through the origin story. We've made it through childhood. We've made it through Stanford with Jim Harbaugh and Andrew Luck. We're now into the Navy, and you mentioned Buds. Explain to everybody what Buds is in the context of being a Navy SEAL.
So Buds is kind of a time-honored tradition / rite of passage / selection process. So basic underwater demolition SEAL training comes out of like OSS, World War II era legacy. So it really hasn't changed much in the last 50, 60 years.
Wow.
The general concept is you bring a bunch of young men to the table and you're trying to screen out who has what it takes to become a part of this. And the best way to do that would be shoot a bunch of bullets at you and see what you do under pressure. It's unethical, that's illegal, can't do that for a whole bunch of reasons.
Right.
So the way that Buds accomplishes that is crank up the pain and the discomfort in a humane way to see what you, when all of the top cover is stripped away, what's that underlying thing?
There?
Do you double down on your teammates? Do you act selfish, et cetera? And so in general, now Buds is, and SEAL training is more publicized. There's lots of books and shows, et cetera. But in general, the concept is you've got 3 phases of training. The first phase is a selection phase. Second phase is a water training. Third phase is a land and kind of more infantry type training. And so in that first phase, the first 4 weeks is largely where the bulk of the attrition comes.
Okay. And
the 4th week culminates in what's called Hell Week, which has gotten some notoriety. And essentially the concept is we're going to keep you up for a full week. You're going to run whatever it is, 50, 100 miles. We're going to make you very cold and very uncomfortable. And as a student, you think they're trying to kill you. Like, they do a really good job of the charade. Now, on the backside as an instructor, you realize how calculated, how meticulous it is. Like, water temperature tables. There's all kinds of stuff. But the point is, I'm going to go to the very edge of what I can legally get away with and still keep you safe to see what you're made of.
Right.
And while this sounds really sadistic, I loved it. I loved being tested. I loved being thrown in the crucible and being tempered.
Well, and to your point, at this point, you've even figured out, you mentioned a little bit earlier, your body is almost like predestined for endurance training.
Oh, and
right?
Cold water. This marbling, I've been working on this my entire life. This is to keep me warm.
But, I mean, that survival, right, and keeping going and figuring out a way to overcome and learn and adapt and all those things that go along with that. So it doesn't surprise me that, was it ever a consideration for you to say, this is not for me, I've bit off too much and I can't chew this?
No, everybody has their thing in bud. So I was joking about cold water. Like, I am not the leanest person on the block, so cold water training never really bothered me.
Right.
The running never bothered me. What I hated was what's called log PT, which is essentially telephone poles, because I'm not super strong upper body. So it's a lot of overhead. It's a lot of lunges. So everybody's got their thing.
Yeah.
The water was comfortable for me. Most of the land stuff was. So I loved it. You're doing a bunch of hard stuff with your buddies and you're really starting to bond. And the early stages of those bond pay dividends decades later.
Yeah.
Because when you go through something really challenging with people around you, there's a trauma bond, I guess, so to speak. And I loved, more than anything else, I loved those relationships and still have them to this day.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, the trauma bond, you've all been through something together and understand what it means to go down and then back up through it, right? So you just have almost an unspoken mutual respect for one another.
Yes.
Going through that. It's fascinating to me because in talking to you before the show, we talked about all these things, obviously, but we didn't focus a lot on the military service. You set yourself up in a way where you talk about it, but then you move on. Like you don't boast your chest about this, which is I think a lot of people have a misnomer about folks that have served about that. And anyway, it's interesting to me. I don't want to spend all the time here on part one in the military, but it's a fascinating story. I mean, there's not too many people that could be a quarterback, for a Division I school like Stanford and a Navy SEAL.
Probably doesn't speak well to the bar of entry for either of those organizations.
They're going to go back and take a look at everything.
Our selection standards need to change. How did that one make it through?
So you get through BUDS, you get through all the training. What's the first time they're like, okay, you're shipping out, and where did you go?
So the very first, welcome to the military. So check into my first team. At this point, I'm engaged to my childhood sweetheart. Yeah, we're engaged. Post-graduation, I'm checking into my first team. And surprise, like, hey, you're going to rush up your deployment. We're going to do an extended stint in Iraq and Afghanistan at the time. And as a husband, I was like, babe, I don't want to do this. This is hard. I don't want to leave you. And inside, the inner operator in you was like, hell yeah, let's do this. I've been training for this. I'm excited. And so you do standard kind of general SEAL workup is you'll do 18 months of training with your platoon or your troop or your command, and then you deploy for 6 months. That deployment ended up being a long one due to politics and dynamics in Iraq and Afghanistan, so we ended up having to surge for a little while. And so in that process, you're refining all of the more advanced skills. Advanced water skills, driving skills, jumping out of airplane skills. And so you're really kind of gelling as a team because you've got the baseline. You've all been through the same experience, but now you've got new faces. And that gets into like, these little details. And I keep coming back to teamwork because this is where we're ultimately going. It's how can you read your buddy's body language in the middle of the night when you're on night vision? How can you know with certainty when you walk into a room, they're going to go this way and you go that way to protect them? Those little read and react, pick up basketball type dynamics. Yeah. That's what you have to learn over the next 18 months. And so you go through that process and then you start to deploy. And one of the things that's both exhilarating and daunting about the military writ large, but specifically special operations, is you're a young officer and all of a sudden you're downrange and you now have hundreds of millions of dollars in aircraft and assets and logistics and people's lives depend on you. You're like, I'm 24.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out I don't know anything at this point. But what it does is the assumption is, hey, if I've screened these people right, the right character, the right intellect, the right physical abilities, they'll rise to the occasion. And 9 times out of 10 they do. And so I remember being in charge of essentially an entire special operations unit in the northern half of Iraq. And so President Obama at the time, this is late 2011, do we stay, do we go? Do we stay, do we go? And there's a lot of back and forth negotiation with the prime minister. And I remember thinking, holy smokes, how is it that I'm in charge of potentially drawing down? And so it came down to the bitter end, and we were essentially starting the drawdown. So we were the last unit up in northern Iraq because everything had to work its way down to make it to Kuwait to be shipped home at the time. And I remember being kind of alone and unafraid, although I was afraid, in this little outstation. We start to take more rockets, and there starts to be more and more pressure because all the security has gone down in that area at the time. And pretty soon you're like, all right. And so I'm driving a Humvee up into an aircraft, taking off and leaving. And the experience was really powerful for me because it highlighted how much teamwork matters, even if you feel like you're alone and afraid and don't know what you're doing. And also how much training and coordination can pay their dividends under fire. And so one of the phrases that I picked up along the way that I swear by to this day, and it kind of gets into the construction side later on, is an amateur trains until they get it right. A professional trains until they can't get it wrong. So this concept around training and disciplining your system, your business, your body, your whatever, so that it just runs on autopilot when quote unquote bullets start flying, was a hugely formative experience for me, especially as I got into parenting and business starting and et cetera.
So let's take a quick break from the military to talk about the family side, because this is all happening at the same time. Like you said, you're married, you married your childhood sweetheart, you guys were birthed by the same doctor, right?
Yes, it sounds weirder when you say it like that, but I promise it's all above board.
Well, it's fascinating to me because your parents and your wife's parents were friends as well.
Oh, they went to college together, yeah.
So they're all buddies and friends.
She was the youngest daughter of they're our best family friends. So like we grew up semi-inseparable.
Yeah.
And until you're like 16, 17, like the gender doesn't matter. It's my sister's friend. It's like, it's just part of the pack. And then obviously like you become a young man, you're like, oh, I really like you.
She's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is because like I'm a father and, I've got my daughter who's now 11 going on 18 and my son is 3 years old. And we have friends and they have like a little girl or there's a little boy around my daughter, whatever. And you go, oh, it'd be funny if they grew up and got married. Never really thinking that they will ever do that. But you did that.
Oh, yeah. And part of me half thinks like there was machinations by both mothers along the way of like, and your kids too. So it's not just arbitrary pairing, but like we happen to be highly complementary in skills and personality. Yeah. And so I remember when I went and first asked her mom and dad permission to date her the first time, I remember them laughing at me. And I was like, oh, because these are like basically my godparents.
Yeah.
And they're laughing at me. I was like, oh, great. This really didn't know. And they explained, they're like, we're laughing because this is the right relationship, wrong time. Like, we see you guys are like a couple of years too early, and so you're probably going to have some bumps and bruises, and we did. But the point was, like, as a parent, you can see good opportunities for your kids, even if the timing is wrong.
Yeah.
And they stuck by her and stuck by me as you kind of weather the storm of figuring it out. And then, here we are, 15 years married, 3 kids deep, and it was the best decision I've ever made.
So it's incredible. So you guys get married, you join the military, you're in the military, you moved to San Diego.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And then what year did you have your first child?
So this starts the journey of military life. So come back from Iraq. Commanding officer at the time said, hey, you like foreign languages, you have a more global perspective than most, you should consider applying for this thing called the Olmsted Scholarship. And I was like, sir, I just want to jump out of planes and shoot bad guys. No, he's like, no, really, like, you got to do a diversity tour anyway, like, you should go consider this. So I put in an application, got selected. They essentially, you rack and stack, and they eventually choose a country and a language for you. And so for us, we really wanted to, and they selected us to go study in Israel. So you spend a year studying a language to fluency, definitely not fluent. So we went up to Monterey at the Defense Language Institute to study Hebrew.
Okay.
And then my wife and I then move into country. Well, surprise, wasn't supposed to be this way. Conceived our first right before we're about to go and have this awesome, like, young married couple adventure, travel all around the world. We're like, oh, damn it. This is not what the plan was supposed to look like, what the playbook was supposed to look like. So, as you know, as a parent, you look back on it and go, I wouldn't have it any other way. But at the
Right.
time, you're like, the loss of my freedom, the loss of my independence, my dreams. So my now oldest, also 11-year-old girl, ended up being born in Israel at the time. So while we were mid 2-year cycle, we were there for a couple years. The back half, the war kicked off. And so she and my wife ended up coming home a little bit early. Highly formative experience, young couple, raising a kid, had some health challenges fresh out the gate in a foreign country, taking rockets overhead. Like it was a spicy adventure, but forced us really close to one another and to our daughter. And again, tough, but I wouldn't have it any other way now.
So she was born overseas?
She's born overseas.
Okay.
To a Russian midwife. And then the staff spoke Hebrew. I'm kind of disoriented, trying to take care of my wife. My Hebrew's, especially in the medical field, is not great at the time. It was a unique challenge. And the reason I bring up the unique challenge is because people ask, hey, what was the greatest part about buds and all that kind of stuff? And it was the camaraderie, the brotherhood, all that kind of stuff. But the single greatest part about that chapter was it resets your calibration for everything to come.
Yeah.
Buds is not the hardest thing I ever have been through or ever will go through. Like, I'm going to deal with a sick parent, the loss of a loved one, whatever. In this case, it was a really sick kid in a foreign country. That was more challenging than trying to make it through Buds because I couldn't quit.
Yeah.
And so that recalibration was the greatest part about the Buds experience.
Yeah.
And it paid dividends.
And, again, as we get further into your story on part 2, which I can't believe this, we're already over 35 minutes into this conversation. The time flies. But, I mean, again, that is why this has to be at least 2 parts, ladies and gentlemen, everyone listening to this. Because, no, I'm not. I'm just saying that we just blew through 35 minutes, and we're not even done to the point where I wanted to be done at the end of part 1. So, but some of the themes like you talked about, teamwork. You like being part of highly functioning teams.
Yep.
Endurance, getting through it, whatever it is, and not quitting, finding ways to do it. I mean, it's fantastic, and it all is going to culminate in part 2 of what we talk about. We're not quite there yet, though, because, first of all, the Olmsted Scholarship. So you ended up, with a master's out of Tel Aviv?
Yeah, so I chose... I kind of am a nerd at heart, so I chose cybersecurity. I thought Israel was a really unique place to study the security and diplomacy component with the technology underlayment, because Israel's got a lot of advanced technology development. But the kicker to the program is you got to study it in Hebrew, which was way harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I was naive and thinking, a foreign language, no big deal. Well, Hebrew is tough.
Well, but I get to your point. I mean, whether you're fluent or not, you say you're not, but I'm sure you got some Italian in there from living overseas.
Yep.
Obviously, English. You have mastered the English language based on every time I've talked to you. I'm like, ooh, that's a new phrase I've never heard before. I'm going to write that one down. And then I told this story off air, but one of the phrases that you said, and it'll come up in part 2, is something to the effect of trying to boil the ocean.
Yep.
And I love that phrase because it means you're doing too much, right? But I tried to use that and sound smart after talking to you, and I said, yeah, you can't boil the water. And everyone in the room when I said that looked at me like, yeah, you can. Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Turn on the
actually.
gas and the water heats up.
It takes about 5 minutes, Sam. It's not that hard. I'm like, man, where's Garrett? Where's Garrett when you need him? Okay, so we talked a little bit about the family life.
Yep.
You're down in San Diego. At some point, if I remember correctly, you buy some property.
Yeah,
right?
so actually we were in Israel at the time.
Okay.
Single income family. We love this place called Coronado. And we're like, man, I'm on single salary, Navy salary. Is there any way we can afford this, babe? And so we're kind of, Redfin and Zillow at the time. And we see the cheapest house. It's a teardown. It's a little old 1950s house. But we're like, I don't care. Location. Like, that's a place we could raise kids at. So we bought it from overseas. We never looked at it. We're just like, you know what? We'll figure out the rest as we go. Sight unseen.
Wow.
The assumption was, like, neither of us are super, like, high maintenance folks. Okay, so it's got termites or it's got rot or mold. Or we'll figure it out. Yeah. So bought it sight unseen. And then we come back from Israel and move in. And we're like, oh, actually, this isn't that bad. But when we did that, we're blessed beyond measure, and we stumbled. Better lucky than good. So we come back, and the house actually was missurveyed, and it had a larger lot than was listed. And I know nothing about construction or real estate, but I'm like, oh, this is probably a good deal. And then, there's a landlocked parcel behind it in a 19-way trust. They're looking to dissolve the trust as fast as possible. They'll give you another lot's worth of land for $200,000. And I'm broke as a joke at this point, but aware enough to call my mom and dad in Arizona and go, Mom, Dad, is there any way there's sausage to be made here? Could we figure something out? And you kind of quickly run some specs and go, holy smokes, Coronado's expensive. Land, good deal. Okay. So we ended up, we turned into accidental developers. And so my mom and dad sold our childhood house in Arizona because at this time now my sister and brother are also in the Navy in San Diego.
So that's just it too. I was going to get to that. So your siblings followed after you.
Yes.
And now there's a deep tradition of military service.
Yes, but I go back to, they look at it and go, oh, shoot, if he can do it, they're letting anybody in. Barrier to entry is pretty low. So my sister came out and was an emergency medicine physician for the Navy. And then my brother's at this point now early in his SEAL journey as well. And so it was like, okay, sweet. All 3 kids are down there. First grandkids are there. We're tied to people, not land. Okay, let's sell.
Right.
And there was a unique opportunity here. So why I say this is the first experience I had with construction. So a bunch of like crazy idea, late nights, drinking beer and coffee with my dad and wife. We're like, okay, we can make this work. And so the deal we eventually struck with my parents was, hey, look, we got nothing. We're raising small kids. If you are willing to cover the cost to demo the house and build us a new house, we'll give you half the land. Super close to my folks. Again, they're essentially my wife's godparents.
Right.
So it sounds a little weird.
But it all works out.
It works for us, not for everybody. And so you start to run the math and go, okay, let's do this. Well, quickly run into the buzzsaw of like Southern California, it's expensive to build.
Expensive.
So out of necessity, we go, oh, shoot, this doesn't pencil unless we can get our construction costs down. And I don't know where I first had the crazy idea. It's like, well, let's just build it off site. That's easy. You build a house, drop it in, boom, you're done. We don't need super luxury. We're pretty low maintenance. Not that easy.
It's not that easy. We're going to get way into that in part 2. But before we leave part 1, a couple of things that you have a story that I have now repeated multiple times. I'm sure I have butchered the story, but I need you to tell the story. But also, right next door to your property,
yes,
is a friend of yours.
Yes.
Right? College buddy?
Again, sounds weird. So there was a third family that my wife's family and I grew up with. The youngest son of that family is this person. So childhood friend, grown up together.
Okay, so that's right. So childhood friend, grew up together, happens to buy the property right next door to you.
Yes.
He's also in the military.
He's also in the military. We were at the same SEAL team at the time.
Okay.
So that trust that I was telling you that broke up the lots, they chopped the parcel into 3. And so I called him and I was like, dude, we don't know anything, but like, I'm pretty sure we can run some specs in Redfin and like, this is actually a really good deal.
Yeah.
We should try this out. So he bought it, and then we end up kind of sharing like a backyard fence, 2 old houses at the time.
And he decides at the same time that you do, roughly, he's going to tear down and build as well.
Yes.
But he goes
traditional like
stick frame.
Yeah, stick frame, site built. And so this starts a journey together of like 3 years.
Yeah.
So multiple births on both sides are happening, multiple deployments over this. The process takes a really long time. And what we realized is there's a case study going on. His was what you'd expect. Custom, single family build. It's going to take time, but you got your local builder and he's going to kind of walk through the process. So he lives through that pain. And I live through the pain of firing 6 general contractors because nobody would return my call, just basic decency and etiquette.
Right.
Multiple modular factories, ended up having the mods try to be built up in Idaho. And we kind of start to stumble in. We make a bet over a bottle of scotch. Certainly I'm going to win because it's an off-site build.
Right.
So now, fast forward, I'm mid 2nd or 3rd deployment. The mods are getting dropped. My wife is, she would say it, like a cannonball hitter. She's like 8.5 months pregnant with a kid that's going to be 11 pounds anyway. So like she's at her wit's end. Yes. So she's got 2.9 kids, and I'm deployed running a command in the Middle East at the time. So I'm not even there for the install. And I'm trying to like remotely project manage and kind of pseudo be a structural engineer and owner builder. And the breaking point where this goes from funny, cool, you're doing a residential build to like WTF. I'm in the Middle East. We are in the process of tracking down a false flag vessel in the Gulf. You can figure out which country it likely is. And we're in the process of doing mission planning. When you do mission planning for a ship takedown, it's complex because you're doing it at night. You got helicopters coming in from the sky, boats coming in from down below, complex timing, lots of safety and logistics. People die all the time doing this. Really complex coordination effort, lots of detail, technology. And it's evening time at that point, and my wife calls and she's like, babe, I can't sleep because you did this to me, and your son is like ready to split me open. And it's freaking Tuesday afternoon, and the plumber won't show up. The mods are dropped. They can't continue and start laying the floor because they got to break through the subfloor and get the plumber to make the connections. Can you help me track the plumber down? And I was a little tired, a little stressed, picking up on her stress, but that was the breaking point more for me, where I was like, damn it.
Yeah.
We are a civilized society. How can we not figure out how to solve this? This problem is now personal to me. As soon as this op gets done, like, I'm going to start to flip the switch and figure out how to solve this problem, because this has got to change.
It's incredible, Garrett, because you were talking about, being overseas on a mission, crucial, life and death, like you talked about, all this coordination, all these teams, you're working at night, you have to put all of this together to make sure this goes right. Yet your wife calls you from San Diego and says, we got a problem.
This 3-inch ABS is not connecting itself.
The plumber is not here, and I need you to get a new one. This is nonsense. This is an emergency. And it grows in your head of like, why is this a problem?
Yeah.
Right? You're used to highly functional, really, really good teamwork, like just these teams that can get stuff done. Yet here we are in the construction industry, and we're having all of these communication breakdowns and things that just aren't lining up, so to speak. And that's the problem that faces you, and that just grows. Like you said, another seed has been planted, and it grows in your head.
Yeah, and I think at that point, I fell in love with the problem. I didn't have a solution. I'm a mechanical engineer by background, so I have a sense of atoms, but no construction, no significant structural engineering. I just fell in love with that problem and said, that is a pursuit that I can get on board with. And that ultimately kind of started my journey, or my passion project with construction and with solving it.
If you got a problem, he will solve it, as the great Vanilla Ice once said. This is Garrett Moore. I think we're at the right point of the story right now, sir, to stop part one. We've covered so much ground in this episode. We went through the childhood. We went through your playing days of football in high school, college, of course, everything there with Jim Harbaugh, through the Navy SEALs, which, by the way, I haven't said it yet, but thank you for everything you did for this country and for your service. And I speak on everyone listening to this and watching this right now, just how incredibly, just the gratitude that we all have for you and people like you doing that day in and day out.
I have to interrupt you and caveat and say, thank you for paying your hard-earned tax dollars so I could jump out of planes and do the stuff that I love. The real attaboy or attagirl goes to the spouses that get stuck with the bill of raising kids while their husbands pursue their calling and their passion and their love with their buddies downrange. So thank you. But the service really is at home.
Well, and that's just covering year 6 on that one with regards to if the missus is watching and listening.
Oh,
to
it's
this
true.
later.
I have a debt that I'll never burn off. It'll take me 50 years to pay her back for all that she's done for our family.
Well, and thank you to her for everything too. But I think we're going to end Strong Conversations Part 1 with the most interesting man in the building industry, Mr. Garrett Moore. We'll be back for Part 2, and we're going to get into the problem that he fell in love with and his passion to solve that problem. Stay tuned. Another episode coming shortly.